We've just started a new phase in the build of our 50-foot sailboat, which is fairing and sanding the hull. Johan has been going on non-stop to make progress and to find out the best way to fair and sand this hull.
From the looks of it, I need a third layer of fairing on this surface. You can see all these more lightly colored areas and the white spots. That's the high areas. The valleys are still visible here. I don't know really why. It seems like the second round of fairing must have sunken in a bit in the valleys, because I can't reach those now without having to sand down these high areas, and I don't want to do that because then I sand through the tweel weave. I've come to the conclusion that this will not be the faster working method of getting the hull fair, at least not on this hull. From what I've seen on the other side, when I put on fairing, it gets so much more fair after this first section going aft. Even if it's a lot more easy to sand this epoxy compared to when you have a pure epoxy, it's still quite tedious work to sand it. Once you're through that first layer, once you have broken that sheen, it gets a lot easier once it's dull. So yesterday I applied a third layer of epoxy on this first portion of the hull here, and I started to apply the first layer all the way down here, and from the looks of it now, it looks like the hull is pretty fair. You can see it's pretty obvious that the high spots are in the overlap areas of the underlying fiberglass. So it's pretty easy to have those high spots as guides when you're using the spatula to apply the fairing compound. So this isn't hard enough to start sanding on just yet, so I will wait with that until tomorrow, and then I will sand this whole area and apply a second coat of epoxy and then continue on this side. So for today I'm thinking I will start to sand on this side. This is the first layer of fairing on the starboard side, and as you can see, it's not applied as good as it is on the other side, and that's because this is the first area where I used that long flexible spatula, and since I've done this side I have some more experience, and it went a lot better on the other side. So there will be some more sanding here before I can apply a second layer. So I will try something different now, which is probably not recommended. But since I'm not an employee somewhere at the company, I can try things like this. This is something that I read about online that you can do to speed things up when you're sanding a hull like this. I have made this plate from plywood and I glued this small disc with an M14 thread in it, so I can connect it to my polishing machine, which I can control the speed on. Yeah, so the theory behind this is that it's a very big surface area of this disc, so it's nearly impossible to gouge the area, and it's more likely to bridge the low spots. And as you can see here, I have the high spots roughly 300 millimeters apart, and this disc is overlapping those. So this is just a way to remove any high spots between those two high spots, if that makes sense. So I don't have to do that with the longboard. So just a quick sand like this to remove that, and then I can continue with the longboard. And then the next step is to put on the next layer of fairing. This is of course quite dangerous, so I will have the full face mask and everything. And I really have to say that I don't recommend anyone trying this, because you can potentially hurt yourself quite bad if this comes loose. But I'm pretty aware of the risks, so I wanted to try it out, because I know that a lot of professionals sometimes use this method to knock off most of the bulk of the sanding. And everything you can do to save some time when you have 100 square meters of hull to fair makes sense to try. One thing I could do to improve the safety is of course to sand down these sharp corners. So if this works out, I will maybe round them off a little bit. But I wanted to try it out first, just to see if this is something that could help us. I have just glued some 80 grit sandpaper onto this. So yeah, let's try it.
The sandpaper got loose, so I had to glue it back on. See if it works better now.
I have to say that was actually quite effective using that disc. This whole surface is more or less ready now for the next layer of fairing. So, I mean, even if it felt a bit unsafe using that, it really sped things up. So maybe I should just spend some time, see if I can make that a bit safer. I think the actual disc is a bit heavy, and maybe the balance on it is not perfect. You could see that the machine was struggling a little bit at that low RPM with that weight of the disc. So if I can make that a bit lighter, and then of course fixing the edges, and maybe just a tiny bit smaller, because it went really fast, you know, to knock down the high spots in between what is supposed to be the high spots. And then you just rub the longboard in two directions, and yeah, it went a lot faster than to do the whole thing with the longboard. Another thing that I will try is to use a 225 millimeter disc with Velcro. I have a lot of sandpapers for that. That is normally used for that giraffe sander, the wall sander. And I have ordered a separate disc that I can put on that polish machine, also with the M14 thread. So I will try that as well, because then obviously it will be more balanced and a bit more safe. The only downside is that the surface area is of course a lot smaller than I have now on this big square piece of plywood. But it's definitely worth looking into more, because this seemed to be saving a lot of time actually. I guess the best thing to find would be a really large round Velcro disc that is made for this. But the way I've been looking around, and it doesn't seem to be any bigger on the market than 225 millimeters. But it would be nice to find something that can span, you know, something like 350 millimeter. That would be enough.
The fairing recipe works better now, with a little bit less filler, and is much easier to spread out. Johan applied fairing on roughly 1/3 of the length of the boat.
So one question that we get asked quite a lot, and one that we left out from last week's Q&A video, is how much have we spent on the boat build so far? So today I thought I will run you through the numbers to see where we're at today. So I have most of the numbers written down here, and let's start with the first phase of the build, and that was to construct all of these temporary frames and to place them out at the correct distance on the strong back here. And for all the materials included in this, the strong back, all the plywood for the temporary frames, and the timber holding everything together with the screws and the glue, we paid roughly $3,000. For the second phase of the build, the planking of the hull, we needed a lot of Western red cedar. And we were lucky enough to find a really nice barn find with roughly 4 cubic meters of Western red cedar, together with around 6 cubic meters of mahogany, 2 cubic meters of teak, and some other species of timber. And that amount of timber will be enough for us to really build the rest of the boat, also the interior. We even have more than we need, so we could potentially get some of that money back if we sell some of the timber later on.
Oops, Johan forgot to mention the cost here, which was $8,000.
However, the cedar in that barn find was not enough for us to get a fully planked hull. So we needed to complement that with a little bit of Swedish cedar that we found on the island of Öland. And we bought roughly 2 cubic meters of that. And for that we had to pay $1,250. Yeah, as you can imagine, we needed quite a lot of epoxy glue to get all of these strips glued together. And we also had acid-proof stainless steel screws holding them together, and they are left in place. And we have roughly 6,000 of those screws in the hull right now. And I think we bought 8,000 of them, and for that we paid $600 for the screws. Initially we bought 90 kilos of epoxy. We used a little bit of that also for the lamination phase, but a lot of it went into gluing these strips together. And for those 90 kilos, we paid $1,550. We also needed some filler for the epoxy glue to make it more viscous and not so runny. And for that, we paid $250. We still have a lot of that filler, but that's what we paid for it. So all in all, for us to be able to get the hull planked, together with the strong back, we paid in total $11,656. And then we have the next phase of the build, and that was to get fiberglass on the hull and to make the keel pocket. For the keel pocket, we needed some vacuum bagging material, and we paid roughly $800 for that. We still have a lot of that material, so we can use it later on in the build as well. We needed a lot of epoxy, so we bought another 540 kilos of that. And for the epoxy, we paid $6,100. We needed a lot of fiberglass for the hull, both for the inside and the outside. And in total, for all the fiberglass, we paid $3,400, and that's including everything that we'll put on the inside as well. We bought peel ply for roughly $700. We also bought a lot of filler for the fairing that we have started on now, and that costed us, if I'm remembering correctly, $700. So in total for all of that, that's $11,500. And that leads us into the total number that we have paid for all the materials that are included in the hull right now, together with the strong back and all the temporary frames. And that number is $26,000, give or take a few hundred. And remember that in that number we have all of the timber that we will be using for the interior as well. But this is not all. We had to buy a lot of tools that we didn't have and that we needed for the boat build. We had to get a CNC router that's shaper origin, so we could cut the temporary frames from the 3D drawings to get cutting files into a CNC. And for that machine, we paid $4,350. We also needed a good planer, so we bought that combo planer from Hammer, a second-hand one, and we paid $4,500 for that. We needed a rip saw so we could rip those thick planks of Western red cedar, and that one we paid roughly $500 for that one. And then we bought some other machines, a bandsaw, a press drill, and some other tools, and for those we paid $2,400. So in total, on different tools that we had to buy, we paid $11,750. And of course, some of that money we could get back if we decide to sell some of those tools in the future. Maybe we could get back, let's say, half, hopefully more. But that's also a cost that we needed since we were missing those tools. Yeah, another thing that we have spent money on is lead for the keel. We haven't started the construction of the keel yet, but still we wanted to source the material for the ballast, all that lead. So we have bought 5,100 kilos of lead, and for that we have paid $5,800. And last but not least, we have what I'm calling consumables. That's tape, plastic for making this temporary tent around the boat, material to build that saturation table, pencils, we have rollers, tape, sandpaper, nitrile gloves, everything that's will not be a part of the actual boat, but things that we need to buy to be able to build it. And so far we have paid roughly $3,000 for stuff like that, give or take a little bit. I don't have the receipts on just everything. So the total numbers so far that we have spent to get to this phase for everything, including the tools and all the consumables, all the materials that has gone into the hull and everything, Right now we sit at $46,200, give or take a few $100s. So I hope that answered some of the questions we've been getting on the costs involved in building your own boat the way we're doing it. Of course, there will be more costs involved moving forward in the build, and actually the cost of the hull is a small portion of the total budget involved in building a big boat like this. But this is where we stand today, and I hope this information could be beneficial for someone thinking of building their own boat.